Welcome back to Aero Pro Coaching. This is Roy, podcast number 4 of Clipping In. And I thought it was a good time to talk about off-season. I had a couple conversations and with some athletes in the last couple days. And I thought off-season training is right around the corner for a lot of endurance athletes as we move into the month of November. And I felt I thought it would be a good topic to touch on. So those who are not familiar with endurance coaching or maybe how we prescribe workouts, there are a couple software systems out there. We use Training Peaks. And what Training Peaks does is it's a web-based system where you can set it up, and it looks like a calendar, and a coach can go in there and write a program. They can write a workout. And in that workout, we can prescribe that on perceived effort, heart rate, power. We can put notes into this software. It'll track all your data, and I can communicate with the athlete. So it's a great tool because the athlete can communicate with me. It's like a diary. It's a diary of your workouts where you can put in how you felt that day, how well you slept. You can put heart rate variability. You can track your diet. So there's a lot of different things that can be done with this software. So as an endurance coach, what I do is I put together a program, put together workouts, typically for a week, sometimes 5 days. And then the athlete will have their assignments. And during the week, they will do the workouts, and then they will upload that because the workouts are being recorded. And with technology today, all of this is like seamless. So like, for example, with cycling computers, a person can have a cycling computer. Garmin's and Wahoo are some of the popular ones, but a lot of people are starting to use like their Apple Watches and things like that. But you can record what's going on. So like, you get on your bike, you hit start, you go, and it's going to record the temperature. It can record elevation. It can record your heart rate. It can record if you have a power meter, power, cadence, like the revolutions per minute, all these different metrics. So it's collecting all this data. It's like a black box. And when you're done, you hit stop, and it saves it, and it will automatically save it, and you can set it up to automatically save into Training Peaks. And again, there's some other softwares out there. I use Training Peaks. I consider it the leader. It's been around for a long time, and for endurance athletes and coaches. So you don't have to be a coach to use it. You can just be an athlete. So anyway, it records your data while you're riding and running, swimming, hiking, rowing, canoeing. I've had MMA fighters that I've coached. I've coached people who have done hiking. I've coached people who have done mountain climbing, rowing, running, and cross country, CrossFit. So anything that really has some kind of endurance component. And so people record this data. And so with a runner, it might be a running watch, and we're recording cadence, like how many times your foot touches the ground, and your heart rate and the pace that you're running. So again, it's just a black box for what you're doing. So it's great because in endurance sports, unlike some others we've touched on before, that like a coach I can't run, and I can't swim, and I can't bike with everybody. It's impossible. So these devices allow us to be there without being there. So I give the workout, the athlete does the workout, and then I can go back and review that workout and see how well they did. I can check out their pacing. I can check out, did they follow the workout? Are they compliant? What was their heart rate doing? Are they fatigued? Do they need more rest? Do they need more intensity? Do they need less intense? So all of this can be determined by using just this, whether it's a runner or a cyclist using their computer. But what I try to do, and this is the same thing that I'm doing typically with these podcasts and my social media, is I try to educate. Because I know that I am not always going to be around. Like, I am, as a coach, as an endurance coach, I can either micromanage my athletes, meaning I could check in with them before, check in with them after. I can tell them, hey, you missed, the workout called for 6 times 5 minutes, and you did 4 times 5 minutes, and then I could micromanage that, just like a corporate America micromanagement. Or I can teach them. And I rather teach them. And I rather teach the athletes and for them to be self-sufficient. Because I know one thing is like they're not going to need me every day 365. Eventually, they're not going to need my coaching anymore, and they can go off and do it on their own. And so if I can teach them, if I can give them the tools, then they could take that with them forever. They can take, how to train and how to train more effectively, how to use devices. And I remember this guy and his name's Vinny. And Vinny came to me 5 years ago, approximately, and he wanted to coach. And so we brought him on, and Vinny's the kind of guy, if you tell him to ride 3 hours and 36 minutes, he's going to ride 3 hours and 36 minutes. If you tell him to ride 3 hours and 36 minutes at 350 watts, he will do that until he dies. If you tell him to go to exhaustion, then he may kill himself trying to do that. And so that's another thing as a coach, you got to learn these type of people. So he is that driven, that motivated. He has the mindset. Like I could give this to other people, and like they're not going to do that. They're just going to be like, hey, this guy's freaking whacked, and I'm not going to do that anyway. So Rodney goes, you know what I learned from you is that when my body asks to recover, take it. And I know I fought with him for probably, I would say 2 years on this. I was like, hey man, when you get to a certain point, if it's time to pull the plug, pull the plug. Don't continue to push yourself. And then, like if you get up in the morning and you're tired, then take a break. Like recover from that. And so he's learned over time that this is the way to do that. And so in teaching him to do that, and I had to use technology, I had to use numbers, I had to use data to show him that if he took some days off, that if he didn't always push himself, that he would actually see improvements. And we show him that. When you tell someone one thing, right? When you tell them something, they may not believe you, right? But then when you back it up with fact and data, then they kind of buy into it. They buy into it, and then when it's repeatable, then they accept it. And so I have conversations this time of year with the athletes. I had one today with an athlete who lives out in Oregon, and I've coached him for a few years. And I sat down and we just kind of reviewed the numbers. And I said, hey, these are things that went well this year, and these are the things that you need to improve upon. And he's a cyclist, and the thing that we finished up with that I'd like to give the athletes as they enter off-season training is key performance indicators. So as you sit down and you look through the next 3 to 5 months, which are the most important months of any endurance athlete, you have to kind of figure out, what are you tracking? What are you going after? Are you just doing workouts to do workouts? Like, are you waking up every day to do, I'm going to go do the track workout, but is that track workout leading towards something? Is there a target? Is it going towards your goal? Or I'm going to lose 20 pounds, and like, okay, well, are you losing 20 pounds just to lose 20 pounds, or are you doing that with maybe a way to change your body composition by putting on some mass and losing some fat? Or hey, I'm running every day in the off season. I'm gonna run every day. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, potentially that's needed, but why are you doing it? So I sat with him and we talked, and I was like, hey, these are the key performance indicators, and I'm gonna go specific into this. I think it's kind of, we'll explain a little bit, but I said these are the key performance indicators. You are your training level, which we track as chronic training load. So the chronic training load is a Training Peaks metric, and it gauges what an athlete does stress-wise to their body based on time and intensity. So if you take the time and the intensity, it'll give you points, and those points are averaged out, and you get what's called a chronic training load, and we like to call that fitness. So as chronic training load increases, fitness follows that. Okay, and it is a great way to gauge your improvement in fitness using a variety of intensities and time. So at the current moment, his chronic training, we looked through the last historical data of 2 years. In his last 2 years, his lowest chronic training loads are in the 50s, his highest are in the 70s. And what that means is that each workout that he does is assigned a point value. Okay, so if he goes all out for 1 hour, he gets 100 training stress points. Okay, if he goes a little bit easier, if he goes 50% of his threshold for an hour, so he goes half of all out for an hour, then he gets 50 points. So if you're going all out for an hour, you get 100 points. If you go anything below that, you get a percentage of those points. So let's say, for example, you go all out for 7 days. So each day is 100 points. So that's 700 points divided by 7 days. Your chronic training load would be 100. So it's the average of your training stress for 42 days. But for simplification, we'll just use 7. All right, so this gentleman now is at 40. That means for the last 42 days, his chronic training load was 40 points. So that's relatively low. Okay, so he's had a high of 80. He's had most of the time around 50, and then he brought it to 40. So his fitness starts at a 50, and then as he builds it up, he averages about 70 training stress points a day. Okay, and then so that brings him to a certain level of fitness. And then as of recent, he has dropped that down to 40. So it's pretty easy. Like when you have a conversation with an athlete and you said, hey, you typically are at 50 chronic training load. You built it to 70 and now you're at 40. And then when they go, well, I'm not feeling so good, or the endurance isn't there, or whatever those feelings you have, it goes back to that, right? Like if you do the work and you put the right work in and you're compliant, then that scale or that chart or that graph will just kind of trend upward in a nice steady fashion. So I said, hey, a key performance indicator for you, our thing that we want to track, is chronic training load, and we want to see that chronic training load hit about 80. And I felt 80 because he's been at 70 for quite a while when he tops out, when he's at his greatest chronic training loads. So I said, hey, let's see what we can do by going to 80. And so he's at 40. We need to get to 80. That's 40 points. That's a lot of points that he has to gain. And I said, well, we need to gain 7 to 8 points per month for the next 5 months. And that will give us 40 points, and that will bring us to an 80 chronic training load. And so he said, okay, yeah, I can do that. And so now each month we watch. We watch to see that he is increasing those chronic training load points by about 7 to 8 points per month. And that's important because you can't, with chronic training load, you have to increase that in a nice steady fashion. So for example, you can't start at 40 one month and go to 80 the next month. You can do it, but what happens is you build so much stress up in the body. There's so much training stress that you don't see improvement. Eventually you get sick and then you could get injured. So you have to ramp it. It's called a ramp rate. You have to ramp your fitness up nice and steady. So that's why the next 3 to 5 months is very important, right? Because if he doesn't put the work in, we're never going to get a chance to get this back. Like, you're not getting this back. Like, these next 3 to 5 months, you don't get back. Because when the season starts for endurance athletes, whether you're a triathlete, whether you are a runner, whether you are whatever you do, whatever sport you're in, during your off season, okay, whether this is your off season or you have a different off season because of the sport, runners will be a little different depending on the weather. But for a cyclist, this time of year is going to be the off season, and for triathletes, this is the off season. So the next 3 to 5 months, if you want to improve fitness or certain areas, okay, if you want to improve certain areas, these are the months to do that, and you won't get these back. So you can't play makeup on this. So for this cyclist, I said, hey, it's very important to do this. Now, going back to that conversation that I had with the athlete about getting in the program, and so I tell my athletes, I'm not going to sit there and watch over you. I'm not a babysitter. You're an adult. Okay. I say I'm not an ass wiper. I don't wipe asses here. I sit down, I tell you what needs to be done, and then I expect, and you're an adult, people, these are adults, I expect you to go ahead and go after this with whatever passion you want. Some people take it a little bit overboard. Some people don't do it at all. Some people are right in the middle. And every athlete's going to be a little different. So I say, hey, this is what you need to do. This is the progression we should take. And then each month I'm going to check in. I said, hey, set up a call with me every month. I don't set the call up. I'm not going to do that. I tell them to set the call up, and they go and take that initiative because I want them to have the buy-in. I want them to have skin in this game. It's not just about money. When somebody pays me money each month, that's part of the skin in the game, right? That's part of it. But the other part is they need to become active in their program. So they need to set up those calls with me. They need to be aware of their key performance indicators. They need to set goals. So this particular individual is a racer, but same thing goes. The same model that I'm talking about here is the same thing. Whether you just want to beat your buddies up on the group ride, no different. And really, there's same thing. Periodization. You always want to periodize. You always want to have an off season. You want to have a building period. You want to have a peak period. The body's natural flow state of this is that's what we want. We want to be able to build and have some recovery periods. All right, so the key performance indicator number 1 for him is chronic training load. That's a good one for everybody during this period of time because you can put more volume in. So during the off season, the volume tends to be aerobic based. It tends to be in the tempo or lower. So a lot of people are going to ride around long, slow, and steady. If you have time, if you have a lot of time, you can do 3 to 5 hours a day, every day. That long, slow, and steady stuff works, right? That's where the pros, have the edge because that's all they do. So they can do long, slow, and steady, and it works really well. But if you try to do long, slow, and steady, and all you have is an hour a day and maybe 3 or 4 hours on the weekend, it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to overload the system. You're not going to be able to reach, and get those gains that you need. I'm not saying you won't see any improvement. Of course, you're going to see improvement, but you're just not going to. It's not as efficient as using a little different model. So most of our work is going to be at tempo 85% or lower, progressed in a specific way, and we want to see each week building on top of the next. One trick that I do, we all get stuck in this 3 on 1 off scenario, like 3 weeks on 1 off type of progress. I do 4 and 5 weeks. So I push the athletes 4 to 5 weeks, and then I give them a recovery period. So we're seeing it progress, recovery, progress. And so you can do, if you're doing a 12-week program, you could do 10 weeks, 5 weeks on, 1 week off, 5 weeks on, 1 week off, and now you have 12 weeks of training, and you get 10 of those out of 12. If you do a 3 on 1 off, right, you get 9 weeks for 12 weeks, right? So you get 3, 6, 9, 3 recovery weeks. So 3 weeks on, 1 week off. If you do a 5-1 split, so it's 5 weeks on, 1 week off, 5 weeks, you get 10 weeks. You get an extra 7 days of work. So, and you can do that in the base foundation aerobic base period because the intensities are lower. Again, you're doing 85% or lower. This is why sometimes doing a lot of group riding in the off season is not the best play because it's hard to keep your intensity level in the correct zones. When you start to up the intensity level, you may push yourself over that edge because we're trying to ride that edge to give you a lot of stress. I was listening to a podcast today. It was pretty cool because the gentleman was talking about people going out and doing those killer workouts. Like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do like this killer workout. I'm going to go as hard as I can. I'm going to get as many splat points as I can because I'm at Orange Theory, or I'm on the Peloton bike and I want to win, or I'm on Zwift and I'm going to do these races, and whatever it is, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to really, really get out there and have this, or I'm going to ride 500 miles this week, or I'm going to ride 120 miles this weekend or on a Saturday. I'm like really going to have this defining workout, and then it's going to make me fatigued and sore for a couple days. And that's typically what happens. Somebody goes out there, they do this really, really hard workout, whether it's strength training or whatever. They're sore, they're fatigued, and that fatigue sits around them for 3 or 4 days. Well, a better play during the off season, is keep it right there marginal, like a marginal type of workouts, like 85%, just hard enough so that way the next day you are ready to go again. And the next day you're ready to go again. Because I rather have, if I'm doing 12 weeks of training and I can get 10 quality weeks, okay? So I get 10 quality weeks, 70 good days, and of those 70 days, we'll say you're working out, of those 10 weeks, we'll say you're working out 4 days a week. So that's 40 working days. I can get 40 quality workouts. Or you can be doing high intensity training. You can go out there and drill it on track days. You can destroy yourself in the gym, and then you'll get maybe 10 quality workouts. So there is time and place for those high intensity workouts, those red flag days, those days where you are giving it, a little bit extra, but those are sparingly. Those are times, those are like when you want to put the icing on the cake. Like if I'm doing like a 5-week progression, and on that 5th week, I think that we need a little bit more, or a defining week, then I'll give some hard stuff. So that way, then they're back. Then the next 7, 10 days is recovery, and then they're back at it again. So I think that caution is to be careful with the intensity, the high intensity stuff. People are like, oh, I'm going to do high intensity. It's the new, I get it. It makes you feel good. Your heart rate gets up, you're sweating, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, there is a specific progression during the off season. And so 85% of functional threshold power, 85% of perceived effort, 85% of, I try to stay that as the top end and then work down from there. So endurance, low tempo, mid tempo. And it's not to say we don't include a little bit of intensity, maybe a little bit once a week, maybe a little bit every 14 days, because we still want to touch in that. So that's how we're going to drive that chronic training load up, because during a high intensity week, we need more recovery. Like when I give somebody high intense workouts, their training stress for the week might only be 300 or 400. But during the off season, I could ramp it up to 1,000 or more. So the average is going to be greatly higher on the chronic training load during the off season, because we can stack more training volume in on this period. Okay, so then the fitness is climbing. So CTL is a great tool to track your off season training. So I said CTL. We're at 40. We want to get to 80. I always prescribe 7 to 8 ramp points per month, roughly, depending on the athlete. And then by the end of those 5 months, he will be at that 80 chronic training load. Now, does that mean he's going to see success? No, I don't know. I really do. I think so. I've been working with him for a while, and that's the thing is, like, as a coach, the play book then I'm going to pull from is, hey, this guy needs 80 chronic training load points. That's where we're going to go. That's our target. Let's go for that. His second key performance indicator. Okay, so his second key performance indicator is going to be tracking his functional threshold power. So this is what he can do for an hour as hard as he can, and we want to increase that threshold by about 20 watts. So if we can, I told him if we can get into that 20-25 watt gain in the next 4 to 5 months, then that would be a successful off season. We look back at it, we can say, hey, you did 80 CTL points, you did 260, or your threshold was increased by 20-25 watts. Success, good job. So and all of the workouts that we are doing, that when we come out of this off season, that's what we're looking to gain. Now, in the beginning, he's not going to see that because we're doing some a little bit lower intensity stuff. But as the off season progresses, as we come out of it, we want to see that 20-25 watt gain. Now, if he gains 10 watts, or 15 watts in the off season, and he doesn't gain 25, is that a failure? No, because we know that extra 10 is probably going to be coming in the build period, because we're laying a foundation at the aerobic side. Now, if he goes to the negative, he goes the other way at the end of 12 weeks, then we know we may not have done that correctly. So we should see some gain. At least that's what we're speculating, that and that's the key performance indicator, because I know he needs it. Like, there's some athletes who don't need it. Their thresholds through the roof. They need other things. So for him, he needs this work. And then the other thing is he is a track style racer. So he's a really good sprinter. He's a really good anaerobic guy, over threshold type of guy. And I want to see what we can do in the gym. So I want to put him in the gym, and I want him to work on some 5 or 6 key lifts, like heavy lifts, like strength training lifts. And I want to see if we can progress the weight on those lifts. I want to see if we can add, push a little bit heavier weight in a safe manner. And it doesn't mean we're not doing like all Olympic lifting type of stuff, but for an example, we may have him do squats 5x5 on the squat after some warm up, and maybe he starts the off season at 100 pounds squatting, and at the end of the off season he's at 200 pounds 5x5. So that's with strength training. We want to see some progression. We want to see it done in a safe way. We don't want to be like, I know people who go to the gym, and a lot of us will do it in the off season. We'll go to the gym and then we're dead. We wreck ourselves. We're so sore we can't walk for a day. Like, that's wrong. Like, I get the first couple of times you go to the gym, you might be a little sore, but back off. Like, back off the weight. You know, when you first start into the gym, take it easy. You should not be sore. Like, you should not try to work yourself out to your sore. I see people do it all the time. I see them. They're posting it up on the fucking Instagrams and the Facebooks and all this. They're destroying themselves. Like, again, there's that hero workout, right? You're doing the hero workout. We don't need the hero workout. What we need is just steady growth and improvement. So, you start at a certain level. So that's what we want to do. We want to implement some strength training. And so each week now and each month, I will go in and I'll look at these key performance indicators. Do we see anything growing in threshold? Are we tracking correctly in the chronic training load? Are you doing the strength training? Right? So are you doing the strength training? And then, his diet's pretty good. I will touch on nutrition. During the off season is the best time to shed weight or to change your body composition. And the reason for that is when you're doing the lower intensity workouts, that is when you can reduce the amount of carbs or the food that you're taking in. Like protein and fat, we kind of, that stuff stays pretty steady. We need that for health and rebuilding and so forth. But carbohydrates you can play with. You can cycle those a little bit. I am not a supporter of the keto diet. I don't believe you should cut out any food groups. I think that's unhealthy. People can argue with me all they want. That's my opinion. I think that there's a good way to cycle your carbs. So you're eating like if I'm sitting around all day watching TV, I probably shouldn't be eating about 50% of my diet in carbs. That's where the problem lies. So if I'm sitting around all day, maybe 10 or 20% carbs is all I need because I'm not using it. But if I'm an endurance athlete and I'm out there putting in some work, I probably need a little bit more carbohydrates. But during the off season, we're burning more fat as fuel because the intensities are aerobic based. So we're not saying you're not burning any carbs, but you're burning you definitely are burning some fat at the lower intensity levels. So at this time, it is a good to play with that carbohydrate ratio, whether it's 20 or 30%. I personally will do some rides that are fasted. So I will go out and I'll do a ride on water and electrolytes only. So I'll do some fasting. Now afterwards I do, recover my glycogen stores by taking in some carbohydrates. But I will during the off season. That's when you can limit those carbohydrates. Lifting, hopefully you're doing some lifting, and then by lifting you potentially can increase your lean body mass. So if I increase my lean body mass by 2, 3, 4 pounds, then and then I reduce my body fat percentage, it's kind of like you're throwing gasoline on a fire there. A lot of people, what they'll do is they won't get in the gym. They'll just kind of focus on the cardio. You'll lose the weight, but you're not replacing it with good weight or lean mass. I'll use myself as an example. For 2 years, I haven't really hit the gym too much. I was big into the gym, obviously, in the past, if you've listened to my podcast. But I got away from it, and I saw my weight didn't really change too much, but my body composition changed quite a bit. So as of recent, I'm going back to the gym, and we'll see how that works. And I think that's a good time to do it is in the off season. Jump into the gym, work on when you're doing those longer aerobic rides, you can kind of mess with the carbohydrate intake a little bit. And then this is the best time. So the next 3 to 5 months, I would say a good target is 2 to 3 pounds a month, if depending on how much you weigh. I mean, if you're 30 pounds away from your the weight you want to be at, then I would say 4 pounds a month. I don't 1 pound a week is a lot, to be honest with you. I try to be 3 to 4 pounds a month. I see all these fucking diets out there, 10 pounds in a week, 20 pounds, that's garbage. Okay, if you want, I know this for a fact because I've been doing this for a while. If you want to keep the weight off and you want it to be healthy, it's about 3 pounds, maybe 4 pounds if you have that extra weight to lose per month, and then it's going to stay off. So, if you want to lose 30 pounds, that's a 10-month deal. That's a year, right? You got to commit to a year. But sometimes we don't want to commit to that, right? We want it tomorrow. But in the off season, lowering, those carbs, doing some strength training. Then, so for this gentleman, I was like, hey, let's see if we can get 3 pounds of lean mass. I didn't really care about him losing weight. I think he was, he's pretty light, 145, 150, something like that. I said, let's see if we can get that 3 pounds of lean mass. Now, if I'm a micromanager, I'm going to be on top of that. I'm going to, figure out a way to do his, have him check his body composition before and after. But he knows. I said, hey, you probably want to figure a way out to see where your body fat percentage is now, and then get your lean mass. And then you want to figure out at the end of, 3 to 6 months, whether you go into a doctor, whether you go do a submersion test, whether you go do a caliper test, where you have a fancy scale. That's up to you. That's your responsibility to track that, right? It's like my daughter asked me how to do something. I say, go Google it. Like, you got Google. Like, if you can't Google, we got some problems because everything's on fucking Google. So same thing with the athlete. Like, if I say, hey, you need to change your body composition, I don't need to show you where the gym is at. I just need to show you the workouts to do, right? I don't need to tell you that you got to track it, because you should track it. Like, you should know that I got to step on the scale, because if I don't step on the scale, how am I going to know what I weigh? And then if we need to figure out body composition, then you need some way to track your body fat, right? So that makes sense to do that, right? So again, I don't want to be a crutch for athletes. I want to be the person who's teaching them. I want to be the teacher, not the crutch, because eventually one day they're not going to need a coach. And the lessons that you teach them as coaches is what will stick with them. Now, it could be a negative lesson. That's obviously that's not a good thing. But if it's a positive lesson where I've taught someone how to do a proper off season, set up key performance indicators, set up goals, targets, and track them, and that's positive, right? They can take that on for many, many years in the sport that they do. So, all right. So here we talked about chronic training load, tracking fitness, which is a good one for everybody, really. I mean, if you're chronic training, not everybody. We'll talk about this in a minute. So for cyclists, a lot of cyclists coming off the season, their chronic training load is a little bit low because it tends to go down in the season, so they got to rebuild it. Okay. And then picking a realistic number of the chronic training load, 7 to 8 points per month, ramping up. It's a good one. If you had one thing to train because you didn't know what else to training threshold's a pretty good number, right? We want to see threshold go up. And then, so that's a good one to just kind of, hey, is my threshold improving? How do I track that? Do a threshold test before the off season. All right. So if you're doing a 12-week off season, do a threshold test. You can do a 20-minute all-out effort and then figure out what that number is. Then go through your 12 weeks of training. So maybe at the 6-week mark and the 12-week mark, you repeat those tests, whether it's a running test, a swimming test, whatever your sport is, rowing. Pick some kind of protocol and then retest it. You can retest it in the beginning and the end. That's fine. Some people are going to do 16 weeks. Some people are going to do 20 weeks of off-season training. But having a way to test that. Same thing with strength training, right? So you go into the gym, you do 5 times 5 at 100 pounds. And, I like to stay at the same weight for 2 to 3 weeks before I progress the weight. And then move it up, record it, move it up, record it. And so by the end, I can say, hey, I'm doing 5 times 5 at 200 pounds. And then I can look back at my training and go, that was pretty successful. So strength training. And then weight's easy, right? You just step on a scale. The hard part is it good weight or bad weight? So that's where body composition, muscle to fat ratio is what you want to kind of hone in on. Another good one is cleaning up your diet. Sometimes we fall short and we want to wait till after Thanksgiving and the holidays to do that. But doing it now is great. It's great because then going into the holidays, those 1 or 2 days that you go crazy, it's not that big a deal. And you don't let yourself get too far behind. Like, a lot of people are looking at like, hey, Christmas is coming and New Year's, I'll make my resolution. Well, we got 2 months. And so in that too much, you could do a lot of damage to yourself. So, I highly recommend to start it now, cleaning up the diet, so that way, and it's a lot easier to do when you're not, if as an endurance athlete, not racing or preparing for races, things like that. For triathletes, okay, so for everybody's going to have their program, right? So this is my reasoning for this. So for long course triathletes, I reverse their periodization, meaning right now is when I give them intensity. So I'm wanting to drive up their functional threshold power, functional threshold velocity. I really want to rebuild it, because a lot of people who have done Ironman or half Ironmans, mostly Ironman, but the longer stuff, their threshold goes down. We see it every time. I've done this every year for the last 5 years, 6 years. I'll test them before and I'll test them after, and they lose every single time, without a doubt. They lose functional threshold power or velocity. It's because you're doing so much volume that your endurance is great. You can run forever, you can swim forever, your endurance is great, but you lose a little bit of that threshold, which is fine. You have to give a little in certain areas to get it in some other places. So what I think is, in the next 3 to 4 or 5 months, 6 months, whatever, depending on where you're at, I like to do a little bit more intensity. I like to do the building of the functional threshold power. Doesn't mean I'm doing like 1 minute efforts and all that stuff. I just put a lot of emphasis on growing threshold, because what I have done, and I've done in the last couple of years, is I've pushed their thresholds up as high as I could possibly get it before starting, we'll say Ironman, if we use Ironman for example. So maybe 3 to 4 months, 5 months of really focusing on threshold improvement. And then when we start Ironman training, that's when we're starting long rides. What's funny is a lot of people this time of year, they're like, I'm going to do Ironman. I'm like, all right, when is it? August. So they're doing 100-mile rides now, or they're doing 50-mile rides now. It's like, no. That's a good thing to be doing now, is working on your bike fit. Like getting your bike dialed in, getting that body position figured out, getting your body fixed, doing some recovery, getting in the gym, working on some asymmetries there. If swimming is something that's an issue, work a lot of technique. If running, if your cadence on the run is like 150, you need to start working to get that up a little bit. People with lower cadences tend to have more issues with injuries. And it takes a while to improve that. You can't just go, hey, 180 cadence is what I heard, so I read it in a book, Triathlete Magazine, or I heard it on a podcast. If you're at 150, going to 180 is like, that's insane. It's like going from 200 watts to 400 watts on the threshold. So that takes time. It could take you 5-6 months just to get from 150 to 160 cadence. So you got to spend that time in the off season, because you won't have the patience to do that when you're getting ready to actually get into training. So this time of year is for Ironman athletes. I really push, and then running, like getting out there, and it's a great time to run. The weather's great, and pushing their 5K pace, 10K pace. They're 1 hour. I really like to see what they can do for 1 hour. Some athletes that's a 10 or 15K. I got some accomplished athletes who are doing 15K in an hour. So you want to see what you can do there. You want to get those speeds up. You want to improve your threshold power on the bike, and you want to keep your workouts shorter. Okay, you want to keep those shorter, because you're going to be doing a lot of long stuff soon. Think about this too. If you, depending on when you had your race, right? So if you just did your race like in September or October or November, it's about to be November, and you did your Ironman, you've built up this massive amount of base, like aerobic foundational work that you've done to get ready for your big event. I mean, you're biking 100 miles, you're running a lot, you're swimming a lot. So your aerobic engine should be really topped off. Then you come out with some recovery, transition period, let your body kind of heal up, and then you want to go back. Your body is primed for some intensity. It wants it because it hasn't had intensity, or at least it shouldn't have had intensity during that period of time when you're trying to build stamina. And then we come in there and we layer in some intensity. So the key performance indicators for a triathlete are going to be different, right? So my athletes, I may look at a thing called functional reserve capacity. It's the ability to do work over threshold, or the amount of work they can do over threshold at a continuous effort. So I may track that number to see if they're improving their over threshold work, or they're building that capacity to do work over threshold. I may put more focus on threshold type of work. Again, I may look at different key performance indicators based on the athlete. And so I would say for a triathlete, depending on the athlete, I would say improving threshold. I wouldn't look at CTL because their CTLs are going to be very high coming off of Ironman. So CTL wouldn't be a good chronic training load. I would expect to see that chronic training load go down from Ironman. I'd like to see it go down. That would be to lose some fitness. And to get fast, you have to lose fitness. It's weird. Like when fitness goes up, you tend not to be fast, and then when you lose a little bit of fitness, you get fast. It's like an inverse type of thing there. So yeah, I expect, I would say the funny thing is for an Ironman athlete, if their CTL is like 150, I would say, hey, let's drop it about 5 to 6 CTL per month for the next 4 or 5 months. So let's drop 30, 40 CTL points, and then let's work on building, some speed intensity. So shorter durations, less volume. Let's get out there and do some, see if we can improve your form on the run, see if we can improve your swim, get you into the gym, change your body composition. Most Ironman athletes are pretty lean, so we probably want to get them to add a little bit of weight, a little more cushion versus being so lean. Sometimes believe it or not, being too lean is not good, right? Like if you're running around 6-7% body fat, that's not always good. You need a little bit of periods where you're at 8 or 9% body fat before you start getting back into structured full-on Ironman training. So let's kind of summarize this real quick. So then in the off season, we go to key performance indicators. Try to pick a few. You want to pick some key performance indicators, things that you can track. I like to do 3 to 4. Okay, 3 to 4 key performance indicators, 3 to 4 goals, things you can track. And as you are hitting those targets, you see whether it's CTL or your body composition or your weights that you're lifting or whatever, then you're making a dent into your off season. And then at the end of the 3 to 5 weeks, you can look back and you can look at those measurable, tangible key performance indicators to see if you've actually made the best use of the most important 3 to 4 months of the year. Now, if you don't have that, if you're just doing training to do training and you don't have any goals or aspirations, you're like, I just want to lose weight. Well, okay, losing weight's a good one, right? You can track it, but a lot of times we'll have athletes losing the weight, but they won't improve their performance. So make sure that the key performance indicators or the thing that you're tracking or the goal or the target get you to where you want to be. Like if you go, hey, I want to beat my buds on the group ride, then those key performance indicators will be a little different, and then the tracking of that will be a little different. If you're like, hey, I want to do the Hincapie Grand Fondo next year, it's a 180-mile event, there's lots of hills on it and so forth, then there may be some different key performing indicators that you would do. And that's what the coach will do. You sit down. So I sat down with an athlete today. We talked about it through the next week or so. I'll talk to my other athletes and map out their key performance indicators, because this is the time of year to do it. As the season's starting to end, as the winter sets in for some places, and then we start to map out that plan for 2019. If you're waiting for January or February, you're too late. Like you can't gain that back. So no matter when your race is, so even if your event or your race is not till August or September, or if you're trying to beat the guys on the group ride and you're in a cold climate state, the next 3 to 5 months are where you can show up to the group ride in April or May fit and fast and turn some heads compared to where you're at now, if that's your goal. Or if you just came off a big race season because you're an Ironman athlete, what you do in the next 3 to 5 months can set you up to being fresh and ready for racing next season. Or are you going to be burnt out, frustrated, injured, fatigued during this period of time? So, all right, guys, a few little stories there and a little insight into off-season training. Hope you guys kind of picked up on a few tips. And I will be back with another podcast next week, and we will talk about I think I'm going to talk about wind tunnel testing. I know I said I was going to do it on this one, but I think next week I'm going to talk about wind tunnel testing because I had a guy come in for a bike fit, and in that bike fit he kind of alluded to, hey, this is what the pros do and this is what I want to do. And so I think I want to talk about wind tunnel testing, a few things with like bike fit where like, hey, my crank, I hear if I do 165 crank lengths, everything is going to be solved. So some things that maybe are, could be true, but a lot of times they're not because it's very individualized. Like, hey, I heard that this bike is the fastest in the wind tunnel. So I'll give you some insight into that, what we saw in the wind tunnel, what potentially maybe help you make some decisions, whether it be on equipment or where to spend your time, or to even get a bike fit, not to get a bike fit, to buy a helmet, to get what is the thing that we saw in the tunnel that every single time made a improvement. There are two things. I'll tell you that right now. There are two things in the tunnel that every single time gave us big time results for those doing wind tunnel testing. And so thank you for tuning in for our off-season podcast number 4. We'll be back with number 5 next week. And as always, up your watts.